Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hello there, and welcome to Daily Dose Radio. Daily Dose Radio is your hypoallergenic 5-minute Bible study source. You can access us every single day over Facebook, Twitter, Clamor, Stitcher Radio, iTunes podcasts, and so many other platforms, including Spreaker.com. We're so glad to be a part of Spreaker, and so glad you've joined us today as we study this week Psalm 97. Psalm 97 is only 12 verses long and is another one of those untitled psalms that we have here in the 5th book of the Psalter, although the Septuagint has that this is of David. Psalm 97 has a title in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text. It says it's of David when his land was appointed, and this probably could mean any time after David had established himself as king over Israel, whenever his reign reached its zenith as far as occupation of property from Syria all the way down to the gates of Egypt. David reigned from the seacoast all the way over into the area of the Euphrates River Valley. He had garrisons in Syria and controlled all the nations around him. So it's possible that is when the Septuagint wants us to understand this was when it was written. I've divided this psalm into 3 parts. This is another one of those psalms about the Lord's reign, about his majesty as king. Some call these enthronement psalms. The throne, of course, is mentioned here of God and his reign as king over all things. But this psalm is unique and it's beautiful in the way it's created. I've divided it into 3 parts, verses 1 through 5, verses 6 through 8. Verse 9 I've set apart as the grand statement of faith, or you might say verse 9 is the great declaration of the psalm. And then verses 10 through 12 as the Lord and the believer. So we have verses 1 through 5, I'm calling that the Lord and the earth. Verses 5 through 8, the Lord and the people. Verse 9, the grand statement of faith, or the grand declaration of the psalm. And then number 3, verses 10 through 12, the Lord and the believer. So 3 main sections, all dealing with the Lord, and each section begins with the Tetragrammaton and ends with the Tetragrammaton. So we begin, today I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. So I'm not going to treat the entire first section. Verses 1 and 2, the Lord reigneth, let the earth rejoice. Let the multitude of the isles be glad thereof. Clouds and darkness are round about him. Righteousness and judgment are the habitation of his throne. So we have the Lord reigning. He is king or becomes king. He reigns. He has majesty and sovereignty over all things. Let the earth rejoice. Right off the bat, we get the statement of his reign, the statement of the earth. So that's our first section, the Lord and the earth. We're going to talk about what happens with that. And we have a key word here. It's very important to the psalm, and it's the psalm that's translated, be glad, here in verse 1. Let the multitude of the isles be glad. That same Hebrew word is used again in verse 12 and is translated rejoice. So rejoice or be glad, that translation is used in both verse 1 and verse 12. It's almost like bookends. So the idea here is that we as his people are going to rejoice before him. The earth is rejoicing before him. It's our job to rejoice before him too. Notice the apocalyptic sound of verse 2. Clouds and darkness are round about him. Very mysterious, but also very filled with wonder. These are words of wonder. And righteousness and judgment are the habitation of his throne. Well, this is a good verse to use in prayer, isn't it? Because you know that anytime you pray to the King of Heaven, you're going to a place where righteousness and judgment abide. The habitation of his throne, righteousness and judgment. So you can be assured that you can go to this king and get right judgment and truth. Okay, well, we'll pick up there tomorrow and look at verses 3 through 5 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.